Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday night, and I hope everyone's having a great week, and I hope everyone had a great May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. So, we're going to run over a quick list of sponsors for the show. We got Melone Management with Lisa Malone. Do you have a project that's running or a Kickstarter that's coming up soon? Please check out Melone Management. She can help you with what you need. We also have 183 Degree Studios with Alfred Trujillo, Doobie Doobie Doo, and Miss Karen Nicole, AZ Power Girl. Check out their work. There's links above in the comments. You can check out their website. Firebitch 2 is still available on Indiegogo on demand, as well as their Patreons. We have Codex Entertainment LLC with Luis Torres. Lily the Demons Chapter 5 will be dropping this summer, sometime later this summer. And you can also check out Ace and Starlet and Nebula Pearl, which just dropped on Kickstarter. We also have Naughty Faeries with Miss Wendy Steen Shaner. Naughty Faeries issue 5 is available right now. There is a link above for that Kickstarter. And it also has art with our guest that's on tonight, Monty Michael Moore, on it. So definitely check out his piece. It is absolutely spectacular. And Naughty Fairies Con version 2.0 is still available for a limited time. The link is also in the description of the video. We also have Outpost 426 Studios with CB Zane and Michael Shoemaker. Check out Black Rabbit dropping later on this year, as well as their other projects, Into the Suck, and the Might spinoff that'll be coming soon. And we also have DPopp Customz. You have a print that needs some jazzing up, check out DPopp Customz. He can take care of that for you. So without further ado, we're going to bring out Monty Michael Moore.
Howdy.
How's it going? That's a mouthful, isn't it?
It's a lot of M's.
That's a lot of M's. So how are you doing tonight?
Fantastic.
Awesome. So, man, I love your art. I've been following you for a few years now. Been collecting art. Of course, I had to get your Vampirella piece that you did because that's one of my main collections. But you definitely got a wide variety of art that you do. From comic book covers to canvas pieces, the sculptures. You even had that massive Bluetooth speaker that you painted on. That just blew me away.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I do. I guess maybe as an artist, I just try to branch out, maybe more than some. A lot. It's pretty typical for artists to stay focused, and they'll say, whether they're a comic book artist, hey Troy, what's going on? Hey Steph, they'll say, I like to paint horses in oil, and that's it. Or they're a comic book artist. And in the last couple of years, I've ventured into fine art sculpture, Western art. I'm doing more, getting back to my writing, which I started writing back in 2008 when I started writing screenplays and feature films. And so I think one of that comes from the fact that I had a mentor whose name was Frank Cavino, and he truly was a Renaissance man kind of artist. He wrote books on skiing. He wrote 5 or 6 books on art. He sculpted, he painted, he drew. He did all these sorts of things. And so having taken 15 years of workshops from him, I think it had a pretty big impact on me to try to make myself a more well-rounded creator / artist. And I think that's where the desire comes from to also write and also sculpt and also do fine art. Not a lot of people know I probably painted 100 to 200 motorcycles during the chopper boom of the kind of starting around 02 to 04 to about 2014, 15. And I actually wasn't doing very much work in comics, 1 or 2 covers a year. But I was flying around the country painting choppers for the pro bike builders and the guys on TV and stuff like that. And it was fun. It was good money. It was a challenge. And then once that challenge and I'd done so much of it, I kind of graduated back to comics as more of where I started from. And I also did about 10 really solid years in gaming art, where I was doing more work for Magic the Gathering and Harry Potter, Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings. I mean, if there was a trading card game out there, I probably worked on it, as well as quite a bit of work on Dungeons and Dragons. So, I did that for about 10 years. And again, not as much comics, but I kept coming back to my roots where I started in comics in 1993 with my first self-published comic, which was called Lords. and I was the colorist. I airbrushed the whole book, and I self-published it with 3 other friends of mine who we all kind of started in the industry at the same time. So this isn't anything new for me.
Well, it's always a surprise getting on
Yeah,
and looking at Maverick Arts, and it's like, what's Monty up to today?
it's a
It's
lot,
it's like, we had the horse sculpture, and then before that,
right?
we had the steampunk motorcycle that you were working on for the piece in the house, and then
It's in
and
my basement. Yes.
yeah, and then you had the wall that you were painting over, and everybody was just like, oh. And it's like, you know what?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? It's time for something new. You
You
gotta.
actually pay attention because those are things from the last couple of years. But yeah, the mural has not been replaced yet
It
in
hasn't been
the
replaced yet.
dining room. It is not. It's been designed, but it hasn't been replaced.
Well, and you're so busy with so many other projects, and it's like eventually, it'll come around, and it's like, hey, I got time to work on this.
Yeah.
Let's hammer it out, and that's not something you can do in a day either.
No, I mean, I could probably, yeah, it's probably a multi-day project, but things are ramping up even more because I actually have 4 publishing projects going right now at once. So, in addition to doing covers for Lady Death and Star Wars paintings for The Mandalorian for Thomas Kincaid Studios, which is a big series of paintings, one for every episode. It's quite the project. But then in addition, as far as the publishing goes, which is a big push for me, I have, we're Blood and Bullets is just wrapping up the Kickstarter in a couple of days. But Blood and Bullets 2 is actually already almost completely drawn, 48 full pages. So the second graphic novel is almost done. Loco Hero 2 is well underway. It's about half done. Then my sci-fi project, which is called Outpost Earth, is maybe about a quarter of the way drawn. And then I'm starting another series called The Midnight Cafe. And it's going to be a dark anthology series where I take more of the short stories, maybe things that are more self-contained, and I can have multiple artist teams working on that.
Very cool. So how did it all start out for you? That's always the question that I love to hear. Where did it start out with you as far as art goes? Is this something that you always aspired to do from a kid, or is it something that you kind of fell into?
I have some weird selfish reasons on how I fell into it. So literally to the very beginning, like a lot of kids, I like to draw, and I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I started playing, doing role playing in 79, 80, that kind of thing. And so in the early 80s, when we were playing a lot, you would draw your little characters on your character sheet. And I wasn't very good at it. And actually my best friend, he was good at music and a lot of other things. He was kind of better at me in everything. And we were pretty young, and I was like, you know what? I want to be a better artist. And fortunately for me, my mom was not only had a graphic design background, but also fine art. So she had a lot of books on the subject. So when I said, Mom, I want to learn how to draw people better, she literally brought a giant stack of books that was like this, of figure drawing books. And I'm like, I don't know, 12 or 13. And she's like, don't take those to school, right? Because they're full of nudes. And, all my drawings, they had like dudes with helmets on them, and the hands were always hidden, right? Because you're 12. It's hard to draw that stuff. So I kind of stuck with it, and I got more and more interested, and I got a lot of support from my family. So when I was 16, I literally decided that instead of becoming a doctor, I was going to be, ever since I was like 8 or 9, because I was named for a family friend who was also a surgeon, I was going to be a doctor. And I literally went home, and I can remember it was sitting down at dinner with my parents, and I'm like, I have an announcement. And they're like, well, that's kind of strange. Like, it's rather formal. Yeah, I have an announcement. And I said, I've decided I want to be an artist for a living. And they didn't skip a beat. They're like, we think that's a good idea. You're very passionate and driven. They said, but we think you should go to school, and get a degree in it and that sort of thing. This isn't a hobby. And so I paid for my own way to go to college. got a degree in design and illustration. And they said, if you need help, we'll try to help you out. But all four of my brothers and I all went to college, and we all paid for our own school. So that makes you feel good. I worked for the school newspaper. They would call me up, and I would come in and do drawings, whatever they needed. And for the school paper, and boy, you didn't get a lot. You got like $20, maybe $40 for per illustration, but you got published in the school paper. I did every single small job freebie. I would paint T-shirts in the student union center with my airbrush for a couple of bucks, just to try to help pay for school. And the fortunate part, the reason why I ended up in comics is there was up in Fort Collins, Colorado, where I went to school at Colorado State. There was a really cool comic shop called Fusion Comics. And excuse me, Fusion Comics also had a lot of really cool art. So at the time, they would also carry prints by especially Olivia, but you could see some Joe Jusko, Louis Arroyo, a lot of heavy metal kind of crowd, Boris Vallejo and such. And so I would go there just to, check out art books and be inspired by the art. And the guy who was the manager, not the owner of the store, we were talking about art or something like that. And he's like, so you're the airbrush guy, right? Like, you know how to airbrush. And I said, yeah, that's kind of my thing. And he said, well, I know these two brothers, and they're doing their own comic book. When they're looking for somebody to paint the cover and of their artwork for this book, would you want to meet him? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I go to their house, and I go like I'm going to an interview. I'm wearing suit jacket, portfolio in hand, to their house, and wearing a T-shirt. And I'm 21, 22 at the time. I guess I was 22, and so I met them, and then their good friend who was the writer. And so the two brothers are Gabe and Chachi Hernandez, not the same Hernandez brothers who did Love and Rockets, that comic. And they had a comic called Lords that was going to be called Lords of Light. And it was kind of like superheroes who get powers from gods, from mythology. So a descendant of Zeus, a descendant of an Aztec god, a descendant from an Indian god. So you had all these different pantheons. It was very cool. So they hired me, I don't know, $100, $200 to paint the cover. And then we became friends along the course of the project. And so I went to him and I said, well, what if I was part of the team? Like, you don't pay me to do any more work on pages or whatever, but I'm just part of the project. Like, I work for free, just like you guys do. And they were like, yeah, great. And at the time, this is pre-digital, right? So no digital coloring.
Yeah.
And so they were using dyes. That's how most comics were colored back then, called Doc Martens dyes. And so we reprinted out all the pages, and I airbrushed every single character and everything like that, which is insane because
it's very insane
with an airbrush. Like, I think about it now, and I was like, what was I thinking? Like, why wasn't I using like a colored pencil and markers and, a paintbrush? It's stupid. I think it was my ego. Like, I was like, oh no, I got enough control. I can do this. It's idiotic. I was an idiot. And, but it also taught me to be really pretty good with the airbrush.
I was going to say, that was finessing your fine details with
22 pages. Yeah.
22 pages.
So we were going to go to this convention that I'd never heard of, this little convention called the San Diego Comic-Con. This is 1993. And I was like, really? Comic book convention? Wow, cool. So we all pile in this van, print the comic, print like 3,000 copies that were borrowed from their parents, kind of very similar to Eastman and Laird, right, with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so then we truck out to San Diego, and we're like, hey, there's like 30,000 people that are going to be here, right? This is 93. This is before Hollywood descended. And we thought, well, that shouldn't be that tough. You got to sell like one comic to every, 10th person. So we did not sell 3,000 comics, but I think we actually did sell about 1,000, which It's a lot more than your average person's going to sell now at a comic convention.
Yeah, for sure.
It was not successful for a variety of reasons, including bad timing. The entire industry just imploded on itself in about 1993. Too many titles, bad writing, a glut of product, and collectors were just like, I'm not reading these comics anymore. They're getting rid of their hold slots. As well as our book was solicited as a black and white, which it wasn't. And we had to change the title of it after it was solicited. It was supposed to be called Lords of Light. And we had to change it to Lords because we got a cease and desist letter from some douchebag chump who had bought the rights to a Roger Zelazny book that was called The Lord of the Light, that was written in the 60s, which nothing was ever done with. But we had to change the title. So we got squashed on a million fronts, including the fact that we decided to call our company Legend Comics. Well, guess what? That same year, Dark Horse decided to have an imprint called Legend Comics. Was it Legends? Legend. I think theirs was called Legends. But it had the Easter Island logo, and it was like a separate imprint of theirs. And we thought we were way too small to fly under the radar. And yet they still sent us a letter like, yeah, you guys can't be Legend Comics anymore. Because they had it, copyrighted, and we were a bunch of college doofuses. So it really took the wind out of our sails. And so we kind of decided, instead of making our own comics, we should draw and do the art and do comics art for other people, right? For the companies, hoping that we'd get work from, Marvel or DC or something like that. So it was a couple years before I started getting freelance work as a cover artist. So my first freelance cover, which is Helena, was like 96, 97. And then, kind of 98, I started doing a lot of gaming art. So then it just kind of ramped up from there. The first couple of years were pretty slow, but we still went to San Diego every year. So until last year's COVID collapse, I had not missed San Diego Comic-Con as an exhibiting pro artist for 28, 29 years, since 93.
Well, that's a great inspiration to hear. You guys faced all this adversity. You went in, you had to change the name, and then
we got stomped on.
Yeah, stomped on every which way that you could imagine.
Yeah, like 5 different ways. We're like, what? Like, how could our luck be that bad?
Yeah, but it made you guys stronger. You picked yourselves back up. You said, "Hey, let's do work for other people and try to get some better gigs." And you persevered, and that's what people need to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just reminded me, and I don't have the art anymore because they never sent it back. But when you were trying to get noticed and get your art out there, I can remember that when Michael Jordan announced he's retiring, and this was 93, so I had just graduated. And I forgot how we had a contact with National Lampoon, or you could just send in your work or whatever. And so I'm watching this video, the news, and he's like, oh, well, I'm not doing this anymore. And so I had this idea to do a spoof on Jordan called Michael Boredom. Like, he's bored of the game. And so I did this little 3 to 5 page black and white. I mean, I did the art in like 3-4 days. And back then you sent in your originals, right? There's not, all the scanners and stuff we have now. And they published it, and it looked horrible in the magazine because it looked like it had been like photocopied. They did not, I don't know if they didn't photostat it or what. It was bad. And I never got my originals back, but it was published in National Lampoon magazine. And then, my same buddies and I, we also had spoofed kind of like Rob Liefeld and that style of art. And we had kind of a separate funny comic that was called Joe Comics, like your average, almost kind of like a G.I. Joe character. And we spoofed kind of Liefeld, and he had this character and had like the boxing helmet, the ponytail, and jumped through the air and a million muscles and guns coming out of the bag and all this kind of stuff.
And don't forget 1,000 pouches.
1,000 pouches. And then we had these little editor notes that we put on the story. And it was like the editor who's making notes. And he's like, where'd that gun come from? How is he jumping through the air and saying all this dialogue? Because it was this giant diatribe, And then at the end, the editor's like, this is stupid. I quit.
That's great.
So
And
if
I,
you can find that one of those early issues, you can find a couple of Monty Moore back from National Lampoon magazine.
yeah, I'll definitely have to look it up. That sounds awesome. And then I kind of wanted to backpedal on Stephanie's comment. She said artist is not really what parents want to hear. I had that moment of panic when my son told me he was going to make films for a living, and it
Yeah.
was great that your parents had that kind of reaction. I was surprised, because anymore, like me, I was like, hey, I want to write books for a living, and my parents are like, why don't you get a real job where you can make a living? And it's like, now people, back then people said, hey, this isn't a hobby, this is a job, you need
Hmm.
to take it seriously. And then now everybody
Yeah.
says this isn't a job, this is just a hobby, but they don't understand the amount of work and
Well, and you can do both, but I count myself very fortunate that my parents didn't have that reaction, because if I was a parent, I probably would have that reaction. You're like, whoa, it is hard to make it as a filmmaker. And I can tell you too, it's really hard to make as a comic book artist. I know a ton of hobby comic book artists who are good at what they do, but maybe they don't rely on it for their full-time job. And to be a professional and to put food on the table for yourself and your entire family professionally, that can be tough as a freelancer, because you might have a rock and roll month, or you might have a good season of conventions or something, or you could go to a convention back in the day and strike out. But when I started doing this makes me sound old, there was only like 4 conventions in the country of note. There was San Diego, there was a few Wizard World shows, there was WonderCon and DragonCon and
well, it
Gen
wasn't
Con.
well, it wasn't popular back then, there.
No, because it was nerds only.
Yeah, it was nerds only, and it's like,
Almost no women went to the shows. There was almost no women fans. San Diego had about 30,000 attendees, and it was hardcore comics. There was no, I shouldn't say there was no Hollywood, but there was very little. Like if Jean-Claude Van Damme showed up to do a panel because he was promoting Time Cop because it was a comic, that was a big deal. Whereas now the Hollywood aspect dwarfs all the rest of us, and we're like the croutons and the wilting little tomatoes over on the side, and they push Artist Alley to the very end, and they it kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the rules kept getting bigger and bigger, and they're like, hey, no backdrops over this amount, or you can't have a full table, now you get half a table. And I was like, screw that, I'm getting a booth, right? But you were going from getting a free spot, because as a pro, if you were working pro and you had the credentials, you could get a free spot, but there's only like 130 spots. That's not a lot.
no.
And so I would say it was probably about 10 years ago when I made the leap of I'm going from a free spot to a $3,000 booth. And that's a big bite.
That's a huge bite.
Yeah.
And
There
then
goes
you
your
tag
profit.
on, yeah, well, then you tag on hotel and
Mm-hmm.
food and
Yeah. It was a $5,000, kind of nut to pay. And I can remember the first 2 years that I did that, I did not make any money. And there was people questioning, why are you going? If you're only breaking even. And I'm like, because I don't give up. I'm not a quitter, and I will make it work eventually, but you got to hang in there. And I don't want to give up my spot. If you give up your spot, you ain't never getting it back. Not
yeah.
ever. This is San Diego. There's like a 400 person 10-year waiting list.
So it's like, hey, I'm gonna ride this and hope it becomes a thing, and if not, then I'll give up
Mm-hmm.
my spot. But for now, we're gonna stay here and see how this plays out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have to be able to, take the money that you make at the show and then turn around and give it right back to them, which is difficult, right? Because you're like, oh, I've got money, I made my money back, and they're like, no, 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 no. If you want your booth for next year, you gotta pay for it. And you're like, oh my god, I just had money in my hand, I got to give it back to them, because that's a show you have to pay for, roughly a year in advance, and so you got to feel like you make it work.
So, and you kind of touched on it earlier with you were talking about the Star Wars paintings for the Kincaid collection. You
Mm-hmm.
also did like that short Star Wars trailer that you had that you posted online. I guess it was year before last.
Yeah, so there's, again, it kind of goes to a lot of the crazy like diversity stuff that I do. So back in 2010, after I had started writing for films, I decided to go to film school. And so this would have been 2010. So I was already like 40 years old. And so we have pretty good film school here in Colorado. So I went to Colorado Film School, was taking night classes. And one of the projects after the production one class, you had to do a short at the end. And it's kind of funny how it happened because I decided I was going to make a Star Wars short film because we have a museum here called the Wings Over the Rockies, and there's a life-size X-Wing in it. And it had been used and shown when Celebration 1 was here in Denver. And so I wrote up this short film, and I had filmed in the museum before a couple years earlier with a motorcycle and done a photo shoot with my bike and some warplanes and stuff like that. And so I called up and said, hey, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a student. Can I come, or what are the rules? And they said, yeah, we don't pretty much let anybody film in here anymore. And if you do get a spot, you have to make like a $10,000 donation to the museum. And I was like, well, shit, that's out. And I can remember my other half was at work, and I called up Laura and I said, hey, can I make this Star Wars short film in our basement? I need to turn our basement into like Mos Eisley Cantina. And our basement's it wasn't finished at the time. So it was just empty, And she's like, yeah, whatever. I have a meeting I have to go to, but do what you need to.
Until she comes home and
right. So yeah, so I ended up doing this crazy short film production. And for people who want to look it up on YouTube, it's on my channel, or do a search for TK421. Why aren't you at your post? And there'll be a 5-minute fan film by Monty Moore. And it had to be 5 minutes long, and you were allowed to use 2 pieces of music, and that's it. You can only use up to, like, I think 1 minute of licensed music. And Lucasfilm had a fan movie challenge at the time. I don't think they do it anymore. And it was sponsored by Spike TV. So our films were shown on Spike TV, which is now Paramount Network. And so I called up all my friends, and we built this like crazy bar setup. And I'm like, oh, I have a Han Solo and Carbonite. I could use that. And I have the Pepsi R2, container. And I even used my own action figures, and we filmed a little stop motion thing, just like the little guy is fighting. And we put the blue glow on it and everything. And a buddy of mine who's a filmmaker in LA, I said, hey, if I pay for your plane ticket, will you fly out for the weekend and help me make this movie? And I asked my teacher about it, and they're like, yeah, of course. I wish more people would do that. So he came out and, brought some cameras and stuff like that. And for, I don't know, $500, we made this movie in the basement, and it was one of the top finalists in the fan movie challenge. So, and it was shown on Spike TV, and it's still pretty funny to watch. I have a cameo in it as like Obi-Wan.
Yeah, because I remember you posted that, and I was like, I gotta go watch this, and I was cracking up. It was pretty good, and it's just I don't know. It's just it's you. It's like you
right.
It's you on a regular basis. It's like I'll get on, and you're like, I'm working on this painting right now, and then like you said, you move to the bike, and it's like now we're working on this film thing. So
right.
What drove you to want to take up film?
I probably, just like a lot of people, just a lover of movies and growing up a big, self-proclaimed Star Wars kid. You see Star Wars 1977, 78 sitting on your dad's lap, going, oh my God, what is that? Darth Vader? That's scary crap. But then I grew to love it. And, my whole room was Star Wars and everything. So in 2008, when I literally just bought some software, and it's called Final Draft, and it's screenwriting software. And I don't know, it's a couple $100 or something. And I guess I thought when I bought it that there was something in there that told you how to write a screenplay.
There's the magic formula.
There's nothing. And so what Final Draft is called formatting software. And instead of hitting the tab button a bunch of times, if you're going to do a character, it basically just moves it over to where the character is. And if you start typing one of the people's names, it'll autofill the character. So it's more of an autofilling formatting kind of a thing. But, and and I can remember it was right before Christmas, and I ended up, I was trying to come up with an idea of something that wouldn't take a lot of locations. Like I had read a little bit online, and so they called it a limited location thriller or horror, something that just takes place, very small and narrow, inexpensive to produce. And so I thought, okay, well, what if like the location is a stranded old trawler or something that's out in the bayou? And that was the whole thing, just kind of came from that. And so I can remember sitting in front of the computer and I hadn't written down anything. Like it was the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do, which is write about all your characters, have a synopsis, do a breakdown, all the stuff I learned later. But literally what I did was there's 4 friends and they're sitting around a campfire and their names are Mark, Amber. And, I was literally just making it up as I went along. And I ended up writing about 60 pages of the screenplay. And again, I didn't even know how long a screenplay was supposed to be. So what I know now is that a page of a screenplay is about a minute of film. And so your average screenplay is about 100 pages. And so I paid a script reader $60 or $40. They do like a review and they give you feedback and they're like, okay, here's some things you could change. And you need to add about 40 pages, like good story, good characters, good pacing. They kind of were surprised that I had no idea what I was doing. And was like, wow, actually a lot better than what I normally read. So here's what you need to do to make it like a full size one. And so when I got it done and I got it close to 90 pages or something like that, did I put an ad? Or maybe I answered an ad or I put an ad on Craigslist. And this joker of a producer who I will not name, who's a chump, did not go on to do anything great, but supposedly was the protege of a really famous producer who did stuff like Heat and things like that. I have a hard time believing that in hindsight. But anyway, they tried to make the movie. They failed. I got my rights back. But I kind of got the bug for making movies. And when we went down to try to film that project, which was called Do Not Disturb, they tried to film it on Lake Havasu during spring break, no less. Not the bayou, not a trawler. They rented like a $300,000 houseboat. And I'm like, no. This boat's supposed to be like screwed up,
It's supposed to be run down. It's missing holes.
Yeah. So my job with literally only a $5,000 budget for the entire production department was to make everything look old and do the blood and I was supposed to be doing all the special effects and everything because they didn't hire anybody. And, there was a lot of mistakes made. But I mostly learned how not to make a feature film, as my buddy said. But we went on to make other projects. So the guy who, my buddy Ace Underhill, who has his own production company in California, in Hollywood right now, and works with big projects. We met on that project and we made End of the Road, the movie we made up at the ranch. The feature film with Doug Jones. He helped me make the short film. And now when I do new projects like Loco Hero and Blood and Bullets, I send him out to Ace because he's the one that can actually be like, oh, let me see if I can get so-and-so to see this. And so that's kind of one of the end goals for the comic book projects is goal 1 is have the Kickstarter cover the costs to get, everybody paid and paid back, paying your artists the rates they're asking and things like that. And then then make make some money is fine. But my end goal is to market or to have an agent as a writer so that the stories that I do want to write could continue to be made into feature films. And I've done a couple of ghostwriting assignments that I don't think anything's actually been made, but I've been paid to write screenplays for people as a ghostwriter. So you don't get any credit, right? But you get a paycheck just like anybody else. It's just unfortunate when nobody ever gets to see what you created. And so I've done So I've done 2 or 3 of those. And that's just the way that being a ghostwriter works. You're doing it because you love writing. not because it's about, like the notoriety if you're doing a ghostwriting assignment.
Andre said, wait, artists get paid? That's blasphemy.
I will say I never started out to be a starving artist, so I work very hard to make sure that I always get paid, but I've been stiffed many times, as many artists have. We all have stories about people who didn't pay their bill. But no, for me, this has always been my driving passion. It's not something that I've done another career and then come to. There's a lot of people who, if they don't want to do commercial art or fine art for a living and have that sort of stress, especially in the sort of, you get in the over 60, over 70 age category, you'll see a lot of artists at the weekend shows and the fine art shows. And usually they've done a whole nother career. I mean, I know artists who are rocket scientists who, work for Ball Aerospace and stuff like that. And they're like, no, I've already got the pension, and now I dabble and I paint and it makes them happy and they get to create art, because everybody can create art, but it's difficult to create art for a full-time living for you and your family.
Exactly.
Even George W. Bush is only now just starting to paint. I don't know if you heard, but he's doing portraiture.
No, I didn't hear that.
No, but he, here's a guy who now gets his own show and gets all over the news, but it's because he's an ex-president, not because he's a really good artist. I know way better artists on Facebook in the comic book industry.
Yeah. And then Andre earlier said, doesn't the program have a finish script button? Did you check into the edit menu?
I think that's just called the save button, but it doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah. And later on they came out with an auto save feature with which Monty wished they had back then,
Yep.
I don't know how many times there's been stuff that I've worked on that, the autosave just didn't catch it just in time, and something crashes and you go back and like the last 25 minutes is gone, and it's like,
oh, it's soul crushing.
It's soul crushing.
I can remember, even when Photoshop first started out, and for a brief while, I was considering being a colorist, and this would have been 94, 95, and I was offered some coloring gigs. And another friend of mine sort of talked me out of it, but the programs couldn't, at least the computer I had, couldn't handle the memory that it took. So you drag the mouse or you try to do an airbrush, a simulated airbrush effect, and it would take like 30 seconds to render, and you'd sit there for hours. And then if you didn't save something, you might do something for 6 or 7 hours, and then the computer crashes and it didn't save. And you wanted to throw the whole computer away. And you're sitting there going, no, Marvel's going to love this. I'm going to color this. And, this was the very forefront of digital coloring, but didn't happen. Which is probably a good thing, actually.
Oh, I've been there, done that. And the hardest part is like you were saying, you were writing scripts or, just writing a book or writing, because when you're writing a script, you are constantly moving forward. You don't go back, you don't make changes until you finish it. And you go back and like, all right, this doesn't
they
work.
call it the vomit draft, which is just get it all out there and then go back and hammer it into shape. Yep.
And so when you get in that vomit draft and you're just vomiting away, and then all of a sudden you lose a half an hour or, an hour's worth of work.
Yeah.
You can't reset your mind. You're stuck. You're like, no.
When is this stuck?
Yeah.
When was the last time it saved? Now they do auto save, but they didn't always used to do auto save.
They didn't. But that was the hard part, before auto save was you were in that vomit draft and you get so far in and then you lose back to here. You can't reset your mind to go back and continue writing from where it left off. It's like you're stuck here where you got to, and it's like your mind, it's a total mental mind block.
Yeah, the thing I love about writing is that you're telling much more of a story rather than a snapshot in time. So if somebody says, hey, I want to see Conan jumping through the air with a sword and there's a lion about to eat him. Okay, that's it. You're illustrating essentially a split second, right? And you've got to figure out all these dynamics and how realistic is it and all this kind of thing. But when you get to tell an entire story about all the events that led up to the lion fight and the attack and, does he want to kill the lion? Does he not want to kill the lion? Does he want to trap the lion? There's a million things. And so when you get to do all this writing, you get to tell a complete story and you get to create worlds. And it's a very cool exercise for the mind because you get to go so much deeper.
So then, you had this script for Blood and Bullets that you wrote. So how long ago did you come up with the idea for this?
So shortly after we actually on the set of the crazy murder boat set project, which was called Do Not Disturb, that Ace and I were sitting there on the boat, Ace Underhill, and we decided to stay on the boat. Like we slept on the murder boat set for 10 days. And he said, hey, I've got a friend of mine who his business is he has a Western movie set that's a town. And we could film a Western there. And I told him I had a Western background. I grew up on a cattle ranch. I, branded and roped and did all this kind of stuff. So we were talking about, could we film something there or in this Western town? So I wrote a separate script with some help from Ace that was a different vampire Western. And it's called Dead by Sundown. And Dead by Sundown, we actually did have some big names attached to it along the way, including Billy Zane and Brian Austin Green. Who else? Doug Jones, who was actually in one of my later films. But anyway, I showed it to a producer in Hollywood, and she was looking for some Western type things to produce. And she said, I love this script, Dead by Sundown, but it's kind of almost all guys. Almost all the lead roles were men. And there wasn't any great roles for women in that particular script. And so I really wanted to see my work optioned and made into a film. That's big time. And so I said, let me write you a totally new story, totally different. It'll still be a vampire Western. Okay, great. So within 2 or 3 weeks, I wrote brand new script. And it is exactly to a T what is being produced as Blood and Bullets, the comic. And so she optioned it starting in around 2009 or 10. And she had it under option until just a couple of years ago, which means you have the rights to go market it to try to raise money to make the movie. And then if that happens, then the writer gets paid, money and a percentage and all that. But anyway, that became Blood and Bullets. And then in about 2015 or 16, I hired a writer, an artist to start doing the project. And unfortunately, just due to a lot of personal issues and the country that he lives in, which is very tumultuous, he wasn't able to finish. And so it just stalled, just dead on the vine for like 5 years. And it took a lot for me to walk away from the fact that I really liked the work he had done, the first 17 pages. And my buddy Richard Boom over in the Netherlands, who does his own comic Sisterhood and a bunch of other stuff, he recommended a new artist to me whose name is Silvano Beltramo in Italy. And you can see some of his work above here on the Kickstarter that you've got up on some of the pages that are drawn out. And not only has he already done with the graphic, the first 48 pages, he's actually finishing up the second 48 pages. Since Christmas, he's drawn 100 pages for me, which is awesome.
That is awesome.
Because the artwork is really good. I mean, I think I have a pretty good eye for the story, and he gets it, and he's professional, and he's timely, and he's almost every morning I wake up and he's like, hey, here's 3 more pages, for you to review a layout or the new inks and whatnot. So he's amazing. And the reason why I'm able to do this Kickstarter right now is because he just blew it out of the water. And then Sean Callahan, who also did the colors on my Loco Hero project, who's also in Colorado here, just jumped right in. And so unlike some creators maybe who their book isn't totally done, I'm trying to do it more like Brian Polito of Coffin Comics does his, where the project is already done. You've reached into your pocket, you've done all the hard work, you've paid your artists, you have a product, and now you're offering it for sale. And rather than saying, if I had started 5 years ago and my other artist bailed, I would have to go back to all my Kickstarter backers and go, guess what? I have to start over. I have to go find a new artist. And they'd be like, yo, man, you promised me a comic book. And so I'm glad I did not go down that road 5-6 years ago, and I could have, because I did my first Kickstarter in 2013 for an art book. So I have done 6 or 7 Kickstarters since 2013, and I've backed 74 other people's Kickstarters. So that's kind of how Blood and Bullets came about. And so now bringing back, COVID was a real kick in the pants to get not only Loco Hero launched, but then to move forward with Blood and Bullets. And it's amazing that Blood and Bullets, since Christmas, is pretty much ready to go to print. Like, it's just in the proofing phase, but it's lettered and everything.
And that's in response to your request there, Andre. Look at the art on that. I mean, the pencils that Monte does are just phenomenal. They're outstanding. And this is his piece for Blood and Bullets. It blew me away when I seen him posting the pre-pictures before it was done. I think whenever you had first started the Kickstarter, you had kind of like the rough out of where the poster was going to be, and
right, yeah,
you had started at the top and you were kind of working your way down with the initial pencils. And
oh yeah, this piece has only like been completed for like a week, so almost all of the art for this project, for me, I've actually done during the campaign. There, if you go standard edition, if you go down just a little bit on that page, you'll see the one of her with the hat and the teeth. Is it on this one?
Are you talking about the pencils for
no,
this
that
piece?
one right there. So that piece was drawn 10 years ago. And so when I first wrote Blood and Bullets, that was a piece of promo art for the producer. My nose is itchy. For the producer to go and market the script. And so this was to sort of encapsulate, gunfights and vampire bites. So I got my cowgirl. She's grabbing for her guns. You've clearly got a vampire in the back. Shows 2 beautiful, hot women, deadly. And so it encapsulated the story. So that painting, which isn't particularly big, it's probably 15 by 20, is, it's not digital, it's a painting. I still have that painting. So that one was the only piece of art that I had done prior to the campaign. And so the drawing of Blackbird, the one you just shown, and then I'm doing 3 right now for the 3-card Monte stretch goal. So that one there, Blackbird, that's another new piece. I'm offering the original in the campaign. If people want to buy the original art, they certainly can do that. And then if you can see this here on me. So this drawing here, let me go back to my camera. Yep, there we go. So I drew this today. Started this morning. This is one of the characters in the campaign, Daniela. And then I've got one more. Now, these are stretch goal items. So these may or may not be on covers, but they're going to be on a series of trading cards that we call the 3-card Monte. And so when we hit 30,000, we decided to have a trading card series. And so this drawing I finished last night, and then the other one I drew today. And I still have one more to do of Blackbird, of the 3 main sort of female characters of the story.
Yeah, and Andre, this is the link to his art page. If you want to go check it out, there's some phenomenal pencils, paintings, the Western pieces. My wife's really into Western stuff, so every time you put something new up on there, I'm always like, check this out. She's like, oh man, that's awesome. And
yeah, I'm working on a frame right now out in the garage for a couple of them, actually, for customers who have bought the Stagecoach art that you see me post before. And I was sort of doing a tally in my head, and my 2 most successful pieces of art of my entire career are not Star Wars. They're actually the 2 pieces of Stagecoach art. So if anybody wants to see that stuff, if they go to theartofmontemore.com, it's a separate website, you can see Western and wildlife art. And some of it's movie related, like Tombstone and Once Upon a Time in the West and Longmire, modern Western kind of shows as well as old ones. And then there's also paintings of wolves and bison and birds and elk and all that kind of thing.
And then you also And it's neat how seeing you transition from one to the other. It's like I'll see you doing wildlife art, and then I seen you doing like the mixed multimedia piece with Harley
Right.
Quinn. You got the necklace choker on her that you added
Oh
onto
yeah,
it.
and I built the frames. I actually put
Yeah,
LEDs in the frame. It had a baseball bat from the movie
and
as part of the
PVC
frame.
pipe like
Oh yeah,
with
those are fun to
conduit
build.
brackets for the.
Oh yeah, yeah, all sorts of 3D stuff. So I sold a couple of those. So yeah, as an artist, I might be a master of none, but I try to be a jack of all trades.
And so, are you? One of the questions I had for you too. So, with things kind of starting to wind back up, do you have any plans on doing any shows this year, or?
So there's a couple of fine art shows that are for the Western kind of art. And so I'll be back at Cowboy Christmas in Vegas. And that's right before Christmas, obviously. And then I'll be up in Great Falls, Montana for a show called the Great Western Design Expo. And again, not only be Western, but at the moment, the one pop culture show that I'm giving serious thought and I have a booth reserved if I want it is New York. And my guess is even though New York will still be probably fully open, still might have to wear masks in the show. I'm not sure. I get my second vaccination on Thursday, but that would be probably the pop culture show I would do. The only one in 2021, because the show in Arizona, I do the Fine Art Expo every year for the last 5 years. But then the Phoenix show, the Phoenix Fan Fusion, which was going to be in May, has moved to January. So the good news is I'll already be there. And then we'll also have the super awesome convention in Phoenix as well for the fans of Lady Death. And that's called Sworn Fest. And that's like half rock and roll show, half comic book event. Everybody there looks like we're a bunch of roadies wearing black. But it's an awesome, fun time. I was at Fiend Fest 2 years ago as a guest. And so I'm looking forward to being back at, thanks for posting the link, guys. Looking forward to being back to that event as well. But I don't know that I'll really reach out and try to do a lot of other shows this summer. And the reason is I almost always have to give up my summers to be at conventions. And that's difficult because that's like a beautiful time to be home here in Colorado and
Oh
go to
yeah.
the mountains and go to the lake and all that. And it just feels like there's been summers where I went from one show to the next show to the next show to the next show. And sometimes when I would do Gen Con, which is the gaming show, and it would be the week after San Diego, you were on the road 2 weeks. You drove 5,000 miles, right? Because I had to drive to San Diego and back, and then I would drive to Indianapolis and back. And it's like a week to get ready for the show. Then you're at the show for a week. And then you might as well not plan on doing anything when you're a week home from the show because you're following up with everybody, you're shipping, finishing sketches, whatnot. So that one show seems to dominate like 3 weeks of your life. And so with COVID last year and with their less shows on now, it's like, you know what? I can kind of enjoy my summer a little bit, stay home, be art director, get the comics all going in the right direction, do a Kickstarter, focus on my Star Wars art for Thomas Kincaid, my own self-publishing, and then I'm doing a cover a month for Coffin Comics.
And then, kind of going back, you dabbled in it earlier about doing art for Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. And then you were talking about, doing art for gaming. You also have your own board games that you've done, like winches and card games and stuff like that.
We self-published 4 different games. We had Wench, and we had a family-friendly game called Pirates of Gold Cove. Then we did some small Kickstarters for other projects. One was called Grub Fist. That was on Kickstarter. But I guess getting to the edge of my personal bandwidth and what I could sort of handle, and really comics just had a lot more of a responsive fan base. And without getting into details too much, publishing games and trying to get them in stores is extremely difficult. And I see the troubles that Alliance and Diamond are going through, and you see the big companies pulling away. And part of me wants to go, you know what? Freaking serves you right, because they're so mean and bad to indie publishers who are like, oh, you don't, it used to be you could be carried by Alliance, and if you had a good game, they'd put you in their stores. Oh, but you didn't sell enough copies. Sorry. You get your games back. Take them all back from us. You need to sell them yourself. So now you don't have the opportunity to get them in all of these stores. And then you come back, hey, you guys told me I needed a new game, and you'd put us back in the catalog. And by the time you get that done, guess what? Oh, yeah, the new rule is to be a publisher, you need to have 3 to 5 games in your catalog before we'll put you in our catalog. And you just want to be like, are you for real? And so
fucking kidding me?
For 10 years, banged our head against a wall, self-published our own. We went to GAMA every year, which is the Game Manufacturers Association. We had a variety of horrible ups and downs with distributors and publishers and people who didn't pay and people who would promise you one thing and then not deliver. Oh, yeah, we're going to sell 1,000 games a month for you. No problem. Send us the product. And then they get, oh, no, we're just a warehouse. We're not going to sell them for you. We'll just ship them for you. I'm like, we could have shipped them, you jackass.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so really at this time last year with COVID, we had a Kickstarter going for a game, and it just kind of fizzled out and died on the vine, and it took the wind out of my sails. And then I did the Kickstarter a month, 2 weeks later, I started up for Loco Hero, and in, an hour, we had already raised more money than a month of our game campaign. And it kind of told me, hey, follow your heart, follow the fans, give them what they want. And what they're telling you is they want comics and they want cool characters and badass art. And maybe I'm not the right guy for games. And as much as I'm not a quitter, because I hung in there for 10 years, and let me tell you, we lost more money than we ever made, but we made cool games. So, now I still sell the games through the website and include them in fan packs, and I sell them at shows. But at the moment, I don't have any plans to make any new games. That doesn't mean I wouldn't in the future, and just do it just like a comic, Kickstarter only, direct to the fans. If game stores want to buy them, they can reach out, but I'm not going to drive all over the country or cold call them and go, carry my game, which is kind of what we used to have to do.
No, I understand the struggle for sure. With just funding this on Kickstarter in March, as I've been out and about doing hospital calls and stuff up in the city, like next week, we got to take Roderick in for another heart checkup to see if he needs to have another heart operation. I've been kind of, oh, there's a bookstore here. Oh, here's a gaming store. And I walked in, and surprisingly enough, I walked in one of the stores in St. Charles a few weeks ago, and I was just like, and I'm totally like just overwhelmed, and I'm nervous as all get out, and I'm just like, I walk in there, I was like, is the owner here? And she's like, yeah, I'm the manager. How can I help you? I was like, well, I'm an indie creator, and I was just wondering if you guys would, be interested in carrying an indie book. And she's like, absolutely. She's like, we have an indie section over here. She's like, Colin Bunn worked here back in the day. He used to work here, and we carry a lot of his stuff. And I'm like, what? And so it was like, it went from like being a totally overwhelming and just to like, we were just talking, and I was like, wow, this isn't as hard as I thought it would be. It just took that one person saying yes to really help boost your morale.
Yeah, a series of those yeses and a boost in the right direction can be a big thing, because the problem is if you'd walked in and gotten kicked in the nuts, right, you wouldn't want to go do it again, because it's not fun to get kicked in the nuts. And if they're like, whoa, we don't take unsolicited material. You got to go through an agent, or you got to go through a buyer. If they're not being carried by Penguin, we're not going to carry you. And then you'd be like, oh my God. And I've done work in video games, in comics, and in film, and I can tell you that there is this giant invisible wall that's really hard to get over. I've only gotten in a few times, and it's because I climbed in the window. And it's like this gatekeeper, and it shouldn't be that hard. You should be able to say, oh, I've done all this work. Wouldn't you guys want to work for me? And believe it or not, out of all the stuff I've done, because I've worked for most of the big companies, I've still never done a cover for Marvel or DC, ever. Now, I've done licensed work for fringe things, like the card game that was called Versus. and I got to do 10 paintings, Superman and Green Lantern and all that. And I thought, man, this is the foot in the door. I'm going to license approved artist. I'm going to get to do covers. Never happened. But I've had plenty of other people tell me, why should you care or bother? Right. I mean, I have a great career. I'm busy. I'm successful. I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I'm very happy self-publishing and getting to do my own. But the problem is when you have one of those little bucket list things that's back there in the back of your head that says, oh, you must not be good enough. You're like, no. I'm going to show them I'm good enough. And so every so often through some connection I have, I'll say, here's my art. And I get kicked in the nuts. And it gets, it hurts. And they go, nope, not interested. You're not an approved artist. Go away. And I'm like, screw those guys. And then like 2 years later, I come back and be like, hey, I'm back, because I kind of refuse to give up.
But no, it's totally a thing. And it is. It's very overwhelming. It's very frustrating being a creator and trying to find an outlet, just for somebody that's up and coming, to find an outlet for somebody to help market your projects or your work. It's like, it's not like you can just like walk into Walmart and be like, hey, can I talk to the manager? And then all of a sudden the next week it's in every Walmart nationwide. And it's it's really cool that that store said yes, because now when the book gets printed and I get done with fulfillment, I'm going to go back there and say, hey, how many copies do you want? Let's work out a deal on how, do you want me to, sell the books to you, or do you want me to put them in here? And how do you want this to work? And you're like, hey, do you want to do
a signing?
A signing, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's do a signing. Maybe nobody will show up, but at least there'll be an ad in the paper that says, hey, this dude's trying, and people are going to see that.
And you know what? You got to do all of it, because I will tell you, I have been to many comic book signings when I first started, and nobody showed up to see us. If there was people there who happened to come into the shop, hey, we got some creators in the back. Oh, great. They come check out your book. Maybe they bought something. Maybe they didn't. You got to be prepared for all of the, mouthful of dirt and kind of go, oh, that wasn't so successful. I just gave up all Saturday for that, but that's paying your dues. And that was the old school way to do it. And I will say that today's emerging artist and writer, and this might sound bad, has it a lot easier to be able to reach fans, right? Because when I started, there was no social media, right? I started in 93. There was no social media where you could just say, here's my art and here's a high-res scan of it. Here's what it looks like. Can I go on a podcast? Can I go into a group? You can, your average creator now who's doing this as a hobby can go into a comic book group with 30,000 members that says comic artist seeking commissions, comic artist for hire. And you can put your work there and you can make money and get 10 inquiries. And it doesn't matter if you're charging $40 or 400 for a sketch, right? You're making money and you're connecting. And we had to wait till you went to San Diego once a year.
Or like with Lampoon magazine, where you sent it in and they're like, they published it. It looked like crap and you never got your originals back.
I never got paid. I got credit. And I can, to the dawn of time, I can say, oh, I was published twice in National Lampoon. Now, National Lampoon is gone. No new artists are going to get to say I was published in National Lampoon. So that's cool for me.
Yeah.
But that's just on a long list of paying your dues. You're like, oh, wow, that's cool. You must have gotten paid. You're like, nah, I didn't get shit. I did that for free and I didn't even get my originals back. So that's literally one of those, exposure kinds of things. And then you feel bad when the magazine comes out and you go, oh my God, this is a horrible printing job. Who the hell was in charge of this? Because it looked like a grainy black photocopy. And I'm like, oh, this is not my best work. It was like an ink wash or something, but all the subtlety went away because it was kind of crappy printing.
I'm excited.
But you did good with the bad.
Well, and I'm excited to pay my dues. That's what's most exciting for this experience for me is, not only like, being able to do the podcast and talk to other creators and show off their work and talk to them, but to be able to talk to people from the other side of the fence and be excited about my project and have people excited to ask questions about, my character, my universe, this and that, and to be able to, have somebody interested in something that I came up with.
Hmm.
and then
Absolutely.
and them just to, if I have one person, I do the book signing, I have one person come up to me and talk to me for 5 hours about how excited they were about the book, that to me, that's worth it,
Hmm.
because you made an impact on somebody's life, and that's all that we try to do. We take our mind and we put it in paper, we put it in a book, we put it in an art, and for somebody else to enjoy that and take inspiration from that, there's no better feeling in the world. Yeah, you can make $1 million on the side, but making people happy and inspiring them and them taking away from what you're doing is something truly spectacular.
If you first make something, it doesn't matter what it is, if it's art or writing or a movie or a poem or music or even food. If you make it for yourself first and then anything else is tertiary, then you've made yourself happy, right? It's like when you make a great meal, you're like,
That's
man,
right.
that tasted good. That was satisfying. I'm amazing. Right. And it's the same thing. If you make a piece of art, you make a piece of music, or you write a book and you go, wow, you know how many people set out to write a novel and don't finish? About 99% of them. Right. But if you're actually somebody who finishes, you're like, okay, I beat the odds. I finished it. Now I beat the odds a second time. I've got it published. Now, printing and publishing are two different things. Anybody can print something and anybody can self publish, right? But really publishing, that actually means distribution.
Yeah.
That means it's getting out there to a wider audience and public. And that's truly the goal of the self-publishers, to be able to share what they've created with a wider audience. And so, somebody can go print their 6-year-old's poem. That's printed. Technically, that's published. Oh, my daughter's a published artist. Great. I was published in the 6th grade school newspaper too. But what you and I and so many other creators are trying to do is, can you take that next step? Are people willing to give you their hard-earned money for it? And then when you do get those first reviews and somebody comes back and they've read your book and they go, you know what? That was really enjoyable. I love this character you created and the setting. You took me on a journey. I came home from a hard day, and for a week, all I wanted to do was just read your book, get lost in that world that you had created. And that's satisfying. And you're like, wow, like you said, you've affected somebody, you've touched their life. Maybe you gave them a respite from the fact that they're fighting cancer, or they lost a loved one, or had their heart broken and somebody broke up with them. That's what art and music and reading can do. They let us escape from our regular lives. And that's why people say art is so important.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's definitely true. And that's, something that I've always done. Since I was a kid, I escaped in comics, I escaped in books and video games, and
All of it. I was the same, exact same.
all of it. You come home and you watch movies till 1 o'clock in the morning, and then go to bed and get up at 6 o'clock for school. And be like,
Yeah,
man, I really shouldn't have stayed up last night, but I really needed to escape.
yeah, and that's why I loved role playing. You got to create characters, and you're like, I'm a 8th level wizard, I'm a barbarian, I'm an assassin, and this was cool. And then you played video games, and some of my favorite books, of course, were Tolkien, the Sword of Shannara trilogy by Terry Brooks. I read Piers Anthony, the Xanth novels, countless series that I don't even remember the author. Anne McCaffrey, all that. If it had dragons in it, I was probably reading it. And those are all those experiences and those things that you read. They kind of affect you as a person and as a reader too. It's not just, oh, I went on this journey. I mean, all of those things probably are in some ways who I am today, and wanting to be a creator and remembering those journeys that those books took me on.
So
Right?
now we know where all those dragon sculptures came from.
Right? Oh yeah.
Dungeons
Dragons,
and
anything.
Dragons and dragon books.
Anything dragons. So to be able to call people like Larry Elmore, who are some of the original Dungeons and Dragons artists, to be friends with them, to go do shows overseas, to have them stay at your house, to have dinner with people like Terry Brooks. When I was in Italy as one of the guests, he was the guest of honor artist, and the show promoters found out I was a big fan when I said, oh, who's some of the other guests? And they're like, Terry Brooks is here. So I'm like, Terry Brooks. And they're like, oh, would you like to go to dinner with him? We'll arrange a, mutual guest dinner thing. And I'm like,
yes,
total dork. But what a cool full circle moment to think, okay, when I was 12 years old and I was reading Sword of Shannara and Elfstones of Shannara and Chronicles of Shannara, that I would be someday having dinner with this guy was just this awesome, dorky, full circle moment that I loved. And actually, I got about this close to being able to do art for new covers because we struck up a friendship and I was like, hey, I'd love to, pitch some ideas. And he's like, oh, they're talking about re-releasing some new books. And unfortunately, because publishers are so cheap ass these days, that they were like, oh no, we're just going to do like a graphic design cover that's just going to have like a type treatment and a stone or something on the front. I'm like, that is so lame. It's fantasy art. You need fantasy art on the cover of fantasy books. And they're probably like, no, we get somebody for like $200 to do a cover. I'm like, I probably would have too, just to have my art on the cover, but it didn't happen, but I was close.
And that's the sad thing, nowadays, through the book publisher, or not publisher, but the printer that I'm going through, they're like, well, you can either do your own cover or you can pay us $500 to do your cover for you. Here's some of our cheap generic layouts. Choose one of these and we will select a random generator and generate you a cover. And I'm like, no, thanks. No, thanks. So, I got
the job of a cover artist is to get somebody to do one thing. Yeah. Pick it up, turn it over, and read the back or the inside cover. And after that, your job is done, because at that point, it's what the author wrote and it's the back cover that'll get them to buy the book, right? Because they're like, oh, that sounds interesting, right? Now, we've all bought books because of the book cover and stuff, but, and I know that budgets are a consideration and that an indie writer doesn't necessarily have it in their own personal budget to go out and hire maybe a fantasy illustrator that's, doing magic or something like that, $2,000 or $3,000 to do a cover. But a lot of times you have to invest in that to set yourself apart, because somebody's going to look at it and go, whoa, that looks legit. You have a Brahm cover, you have a Justin Sweet or a Rob Rupel, one of these guys that's going to do something amazing. And then when you put it on Kickstarter, people are going to go, damn, I got to read that, and that's why art is so important, because that's your marketing tool. And I see people, and I get many inquiries throughout the year for people looking for book covers. And sometimes I'm just not available, and it's not a money thing. It's I'm booked and I can't take on projects. But I feel disappointed when somebody says, oh yeah, my book doesn't sell very good. And, it might be an amazing story that people don't get a chance to read, but the cover art is so bad that people just aren't that interested in it because it's not intriguing, or somebody with a minor Photoshop skill Frankenstein something together. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a jerk, but there's a lot of that out there.
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's the same reason why there's variant covers for comic books. You don't want a cookie cutter cover. You don't want a cover that blends in when you walk into a library and there's 5,000 books on this one shelf and you can pull off 95% of them and they all have a cover that relatively looks the same. And then you find that one that you're like, oh, Lord of the Rings cover, this is fantastic. What's this about?
Right. Well, I can't even see the whole image behind your head, but to me, what I can see is intriguing and it makes you want to know more about it. Okay, what's this character story? What's, are those weapons sci-fi? Are they magical? Is it imbued with, something else? What's part of that? And so what I see a lot is when you're in not necessarily a bookstore, but say you're in the airport and they've got, 10 books all together. They've gone away from illustrated covers so far, especially from traditional illustration, that they kind of look like the person actually said yes to the generic cover. And these might even be big time authors. And you're like, really? That's your cover? And they just they're all phoned in. Whereas I've made a living out of trying to do covers for people, and first big breaks through Wizards of the Coast to do wraparound sci-fi covers. And, they would give you a synopsis and they would say, we need these 4 characters on it. And you have to create them, right? Nobody's ever drawn them before. It's like when I was working on the Harry Potter game, the movies were not out. So you couldn't, I can remember talking to the art director. I said, what is it says here, I got to draw the entrance to Hogwarts.
What does the Hogwarts look like?
And he said, it's up to you. nobody's ever seen the entrance to Hogwarts. Nobody's ever seen the Quidditch Cup. So I got to design the Quidditch Cup and the so-and-so cup and illustrate chocolate frogs and Dumbledore and all this, because there was 13 artists who were chosen to work on that game before the movies were out. And then there was people who, when the game was out, they were like, there was a lot of stuff in the movies that was similar to the game. We're like, yeah, I'm sure they provided copies of the game to the people who are doing the visuals, but a lot of it's just similar fantasy. I'm not saying they based on that. I'm like, well, it's probably going to look like a medieval door.
Yeah, no matter which way you spin it.
But our game was aimed more towards the tween crowd. And so, we weren't doing over the top giant cinematic stuff. It was, card game art that was mildly cartoony, that was supposed to be sort of a combo of what I think her name was Mary Dupree, who did the original covers for Harry Potter. And they were real simple kind of kids drawings in chalk pastel. So we were supposed to meld sort of that look with kind of like fantasy gaming art, colorful and fun and not scary. So.
Yeah, I always looked at, my wife's got the Harry Potter books, and I've always looked at the covers, and it's like, they were that different pastel look to them.
Yeah, kind of in illustrative terms, very simple.
Very simple,
but colorful, and the market that they were aimed at, they were successful for that, and certainly probably the most successful book series in at least modern history since Tolkien.
Yep. Well, I don't want to keep you all night. We've had a great conversation. It's been a lot of fun, Monty.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you being on. So what I want to do is I want to give you the full screen, kind of give everybody an idea where they can find you. I popped some of the links in here. We've got your the Art of Monty Moore for some of your Wild West, more Western stuff. And then we've got mavarts.com. And
Yep, that's the pop culture one. Yep.
But I want to give you a chance to tell everybody who you are, where they can find you for anybody that's dropping in late, and kind of give them the elevator pitch of Blood and Bullets, if you would.
Okay. All righty. Well, I'm Monty Moore. I've been a comic book veteran, artist, illustrator in games, comics, and movies for almost 30 years. A lot of people know me from the gaming and comics art that you can see at mavarts.com. And on Facebook, you can send me a friend request to Monty Michael Moore, or you can just follow my artist page if you prefer, and that's Monty M. Moore. And then each of my publishing properties also has its own page. So if you were to look up Blood and Bullets, or you were to look up Loco Hero, my previous title, which will be launching again in July, and then my new project called The Midnight Cafe, which is going to be a dark anthology series. And so you can see all those on social media. You can also follow me on Instagram at mavarts. I do post them on there. I'm more active on social media on Facebook, where I post daily. And I've got a lot of writing projects in the works. I'm also the exclusive artist for The Mandalorian for Thomas Kincaid Studios. So happy May the 4th to everyone out there. If you're a Star Wars fan, you can see my artwork on their website. And then I'm hoping soon that I'll be able to offer those as well. And if you want to see any of the Western and wildlife art that is also Western cinema, like Tombstone and art of stagecoaches and bears and wildlife like wolves and such, you can go to the artofmontymore.com. That's a separate website for all of that. So that's kind of what I have going on. If you want to visit Blood and Bullets on Kickstarter, Blood and Bullets is a vampire Western. It's a supernatural Western. This first issue is a 48-page graphic novel, and it will be a 2-part arc. So in the fall, we hope to launch part 2 for the Blood and Bullets. You can go to inked.pub/Blood and Bullets, or you can search Blood and Bullets on Kickstarter. You can also search my name, Monty M. Moore. We just have about 3 days left of the campaign. We're going to wrap things up on Friday. We've had a fantastic campaign. We are just at about 500 great backers and raised over $35,000 for the campaign. So that assures rolling right into issue 2, which is already drawn. And for those who might be a little skeptical about an artist as a writer, Loco Hero was very well received. We also won Cover of the Year by the Independent Creator Awards for the Honor Bound cover, which we also raised several $1,000s for our wounded veterans, and was also runner-up for Publisher of the Year and Indie Character of the Year. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of confidence in the project. You can see some of the art behind me that also has variant covers from the likes of Jason Metcalf, Stephen B. Scott, Marat Michaels, and Mark Huizinga, as well as myself. So if you think you might enjoy gunfights and vampire bites in the Old West, I'm sure you'll like these strong, memorable, charismatic characters, Mary Masterson and Blackbird and Daniela Volska from Europe. It's a project you can really sink your teeth into, I think. So thanks everybody for joining. Thank you, Kevin G over at Inked Marketing. Thank you, Russell Allen, for having me on your show. I really enjoyed this. This was a little bit deeper conversation. Got to learn a little bit about me as an artist. Hopefully any of the folks who are watching can be inspired. Don't give up when they kick you in the nuts, which is going to happen, or the crotch.
Over and over.
Yeah, it's not just a guy thing. We all have to pay our dues. Just pick yourself up and keep on trucking if that's what your passion is. And it can be very rewarding. You get to create things that are lasting. One of the things that an artist gets to do is when we're long gone, hopefully our artists, our art or our writing or our movies or anything that we create, our music, will live on long after we will.
Like Tolkien's work.
Exactly.
Well, thanks so much for being on, Monty. I'm going to kick you back to the green room for just a second. If you want to hang out back there, I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Expect more.
Expect more. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching tonight. For those of you who go back and watch this show, thank you very much for watching. I hope you take inspiration from this. It was really great to sit down and talk to Monty about his inspirations, how he came to be an artist, and how he dabbles in all this different stuff and just likes to be a jack of all trades. It's really cool. Definitely, please go check out those websites. Check out the art of Monty Michael Moore. Check out mavarts.com. Check out Maverick Arts on Facebook. Join the group. Like it. Follow it. And see all the cool stuff that he has to offer. He's always putting up really neat stuff all the time. I find myself going, wow. Especially his pencil drawings. The graphite drawings that he does is phenomenal. The art just for Blood and Bullets is amazing, as you guys seen earlier in some of the images I showed with just the pencil drawings. Even without color, they look fantastic. So everyone, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for watching the show. Thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And as always, Rust Explode Studios, projects that'll blow your mind. You guys have a great night.